The Superstition Mountains are a range of mountains in Arizona located to the east of the Phoenix metropolitan area. And they are anchored by Superstition Mountain. Now, there have been much folklore and many stories that are superstitious that's come out of this area, all the way back to the Apache Indians. Now, the Apache Indians believe that there is a hole that's located in Superstition Mountain that goes down into hell and then into the underworld, and all the dust storms and activity comes from this hole in the mountain. Okay, welcome viewers to the Mysteries to Search today, and I have with me two men that had visited Superstition Mountain back in the 70s, and this is Joe Thibeault and Jim Gerard, and I might have just mispronounced that, but welcome today, you all, and I received an email here from Joe, or Jim, here on the right side of your screen, and he had interviewed Joe a while back, and I seen that video, and he had an interesting story, and that's what I asked them to come on today for. And Joe, if you would, could you start back to when you smelled that earthy smell and start with that experience and kind of take us through what happened there and where you were at?
Okay, I was living on Superstition Mountain taking care of a house, and I felt when I was in the yard, like working on the flower beds and stuff, I often felt like I was being watched. So I resented it, so I came up with this idea that every time I felt like I was being watched, like somebody was reading my mind, I would think of a movie or a TV show or something that would prevent them from actually seeing what I was thinking. That went on for a couple of weeks, and I didn't think much of it, except that the more I got to see into that being's mind, it was really beautiful. So and then one day I heard noise in the master bedroom. I knew I was the only person in the house, and I went into there, and I knew there was somebody on the other side of the bed, but I couldn't see anybody. So I says, "Why can't I see you?" No answer. "Why can't I see you?" And then I made the mistake of communicating with it in its own form of communication, which I had gathered while they were watching my mind, which is they communicate in a form of burst, what I call it. It's like they put all their emotion and knowledge into one package and just send it. So I asked it, I says, all beings have the right to live to the reality they were born to. I was born to free will. How can you stop me from seeing you? And then he said it would damage you. And from then on, I got to see other beings, but that one there was the rapid beating of wings that sounded like air was being moved really, really fast. There was an earthy smell, as if it smelled like a basement that's been closed for a very long time. And at that point where we were having this thing here where he asked me who I was, because he was surprised that I could communicate with him. And I kept asking, "Why can't I see you?" And he kept asking, "Who are you?" And at that point, a desert cat ran into the room, started leaping through the air, attacking somebody I couldn't see. And that person went right through the wall and into the bathroom. So I had studied physics for 4 years and stuff, and that completely changed my concept of physics. How could somebody who could make noise, be smelled, also go through a wall? It didn't match anything I had learned before.
Yeah.
And then a few days later, I'm watching TV in the living room, and when all of a sudden a cat jumps on my lap, a dog runs under my feet, and I figured they're scared of something. And I looked behind me, and there was a being of white light. And I laughed and looked at the animals, and I said, "And you guys think I can save you?" And I got up and walked up to the being and looked at him in the face. And I believe that was an angel, because the feeling, the spirituality was really, really intense. And then I tried to go to bed, but all these events had kind of racked my nerves. So I was laying in bed and I couldn't fall asleep. When all of a sudden one of those angel white light beings came through the door, looked at me, told me to go to sleep. I woke up the next day totally arrested. And after that, I was visited by various types of beings. So it's like when I was listening to your tape and you were saying he was black and he was solid. I saw two different kinds of beings that looked like that. But
well, hold on. Let's before we go too far into those other encounters. Now this thing that smelled earthy, that when the cat came across through the room, it actually jumped up. Did it really like you could tell that it was attacking something that was solid and you just couldn't see it?
It just made like one attack, and whatever it was went right through the wall and into the bathroom.
Right, and yeah, I guess since you watched my video, I don't know if you watched another one I had where I had a being that came through the wall, and it was amazing to me, like you just said, to where that something could be solid or have make noise and things like that. So it has to be solid, but how can it pass through a wall? That's a very interesting thing to even ponder. So I get what you're saying there, how that kind of shattered your experience. And you said something in the video there that it went through the wall, through the bathroom, and your cat pleaded with you.
Yes, I went to go into the bathroom, and the cat was right in front of the door asking me not to go.
Yeah.
So I figured at that time, maybe the cat's smarter than I am.
Yeah.
So I didn't go in.
I thought that was pretty cool that your cat would stand in the way, because I think that sometimes the animals tend to be able to see things that we aren't able to see.
Yeah, I figured she was trying to protect me from something.
Right. And then you had this other thing that you thought was an angel of light, and you got a presence from that, and you picked that up to be maybe, was you thinking maybe that angel was there to kind of protect you from any of the negative entities and told you to go, to sleep and things like that, and not worry?
I think I got the impression that he was there to take care of me.
Right, yeah.
This was all being very traumatic, and to me, whenever he showed up, I just felt really it had a high level of spirituality, and you actually understand what the words angel-like mean when you're in their presence. It's very spiritual.
Right, yeah. Okay. Then at one point you weren't able to sleep, so he was able to give you enough comfort to where you felt safe to going to sleep.
I just passed out. Woke up the next day totally rested. So okay. I figured he was again looking after me.
All right. So let's see here. Now, when you said something, you were seeing these other dark type forms, like in the video Hollow Earth, My Encounter with the Darrow. Did you have those kind of things that were showing up?
Only two different kinds. One kind, they were very tall and like hooded and made out of dark matter, and there was two of them, and introduced as the Guardians of Time. And there was another twice that I saw beings made out of dark marble, but he introduced himself as the eyes that see God.
Oh, really? Wow. I didn't ever hear that. And it looked like a dark type shadow, the same as in the other video.
They both looked like they were made out of dark matter, dark material.
And they were hooded. Could you see the eyes on them?
No, the eyes that see God had no hood at all. All it was two huge eyes. They almost had the shape of a huge tire, except that in the middle it was smaller. And there was two huge eyes, and they were completely surrounded by dark matter, and they were dark themselves. But you could still see that there was like, it's kind of hard to explain. It's like in your video when you say it was black, but it was solid.
Right. Yes. Correct. Yeah. So one of them was a humanoid form.
Beings that I met that were black.
So one of them was a humanoid form, and then the other one was just like
the other one was just two huge eyes.
Two huge eyes, and he said that he was the what of time?
The guardian. They were the guardians of time, and I get the impression that they're the ones who opened portals and stuff, because like whenever they came around, it's like in one of your videos you talk about how your room became 100 feet to the door and stuff. There was one of the dimensions, or wherever they took me, had no measurements as we know them. It was like I instantly gathered that, like if you were in a room or anything else, it was as big or as small as you wanted it to be. That like your mind controlled that.
Yeah, I think that's a one hard concept on some of my videos to get across. That in another dimension, in the dimension that those beings exist in, the time, if time is not the same, then space isn't either, because time and space are interlinked together. You don't have spatial things, and you don't have time concepts in their dimension. It's only really in ours, and that. So you go ahead and elaborate on that if you want.
It's like, I think it's like in the old Jewish prophet that was brought aboard to measure a place.
Right, yeah.
I think that the beings living in that dimension have no concept of inches and miles and stuff the way we do.
Right.
And it might have been why, excuse me, that prophet was brought aboard to measure the place, because they would need somebody from our dimension to do measurements.
Yeah.
Because it exists in theirs.
Well, that's interesting. I haven't thought about that before, but yeah, that's true. I noticed in the book of Genesis when it says the Bible says that God planted a garden eastward in Eden. When I looked that word eastward up in the Hebrew, it meant antiquity, and it had to do with far past in time. And then it also meant east. So that one word was a time and a space word, where time and space in their words were tied together. You didn't have separate words for it. So time and space are all in the same word. And I think that is to give us a concept that it is tied together. And when you have things that come from the other dimension, the only way to even begin to comprehend that a little bit is to kind of toss out some of our three-dimensional thinking and what have you.
My view is that you can experience it, but you don't understand it.
Right, yeah. I agree with that. It takes a long time to be able to even grasp a little bit, and then the more I learn, the less I think I even know. So.
Oh yeah.
So you had
of being a human.
So you had these things that were seeming. You said were trying to look into your mind, and you would think of movies and things like that to try to keep them from tapping into your mind, and then you was able to kind of tap into theirs a little.
Whoever was doing it became really sloppy after a while, because like the minute I noticed that I was being watched, I would start thinking about, and it was all like they weren't paying that much attention anymore. Whether there's one or many, I never know. But it got to the point where they had established the mind link, but they were just watching the surface stuff, so I got to see their mind. And their concept of thought, their feelings, emotions are different than ours, but there are still some similarities. Like he was reminiscing. I reminded him of somebody for some reason. I reminded him of something, I don't know. But I really got fascinated by the concept of how their thinking went. They can put entire concepts of thought, emotions, and everything else into like one. It's almost like a Mayan glyph, or if you can think of metabolism, how a whole bunch of different things become one.
Right.
That's their form of communication.
And how were you able to discover that?
Well, mainly by, like I said, he was looking in my mind. He had established the mind link. So I could see in his mind, but he didn't realize it. And it's not till I walked into that room where that being was that wouldn't let me see him that they realized that I had actually been able to understand their form of thinking. And that's why he asked, "Who are you?" And it's not till the next day that they came back, excuse me, and they determined that I was just human. I don't know who they thought I was. But
so they were tapping into you. That's kind of like Richard Shaver. He was listening in on some other type of something, and they didn't even realize it until he interjected. So you're saying they didn't even realize you were listening in?
Not for weeks. Not till I lost it and I communicated with that being in that bedroom there that was across the room. Then when I started communicating with him and he realized that I could communicate, I had, with a sense of humor, I've always thought that if I wrote a book, I would describe the next couple of weeks that happened after that as the squirrel that spoke English. Because it was just like if you went in your backyard and a squirrel came to you and said a few words of English, and then you had to tell everybody that you had found a squirrel that could speak English, you know.
Right.
So even though I was not very good at it, I'm sure, just the fact that I had communicated in their form of communication is what brought about all these visits and stuff afterwards.
Right. So was there any more visits after you had left Superstition Mountain, or?
Yes, the last time was about 5 years ago here in Massachusetts.
Can you tell us about that one?
But these are different visits than I had over there, in the sense that in Arizona, like I could see beings and stuff like that. I did see the eyes that can see God twice, and that was here in Massachusetts. And but I don't. Sometimes like 5-6 years will go by that they just let me live a normal life, and then all of a sudden they show up and scare everybody around me. You know,
Right.
that to me that's the only negative part I've had, because they've always shown me respect. They've always treated me well, all of them. Except that when there's people around me, they go into hysteria. And most people do not handle this very well.
No, and I can understand why. I think it might be better for. I wouldn't want my kids to experience it. You know what I mean? Because my experiences were very traumatic. My first one was anyway. I don't know if you which videos you watched, but I had one encounter when I was 5 years old, and it was very traumatic, to where I was scared, you know, to ever go to sleep or go to bed until I was, you know, around 15 years old. So sometimes it's very traumatic, and it sounds like yours weren't necessarily traumatic to you, and they didn't turn, you know, real bad for you. So what do you know? Do you think you got anything out of these encounters, and what you might have learned, or?
Basically, yeah, because some of them were spiritual. Like I said, the angels were very spiritual. They taught me a great deal. Others, it's almost like you see them, they're gone, but there's no emotions. There's very little contact. There was whatever the purpose was. But yeah, I did learn a lot. I was able to do many things in my life that I probably would have never been able to do otherwise. And it's because of what I learned, in the sense, especially in the presence of angels, you can learn an awful lot. They have this strange way of communicating with you, where you learn just by absorbing the feelings that they're having, the emotions that they're having.
Right.
But like 1970 at Yale, I was asked by the students there to go and help them out. They were having a big riot, and the pre-med student had organized to prevent the radicals from taking over. And I went there, and it's like the whole day was totally controlled. I would talk to somebody, they'd be hostile towards me, and in less than a minute they'd be smiling and giving me everything they wanted. They were completely controlling all the people around me all day long.
So you feel like you got some help and some favor from these beings, and help you in your endeavors?
Well, I was doing their work, and they were helping me get it done.
Right. Well, that's cool.
Like I went to student headquarters, and it was full of students, the ones that were in charge of the marshals and everything else that was going at Yale University. And within a few minutes of walking, the phone started ringing and everybody left. So that me and my younger brother were the only people left in headquarters. And then this young lady from pre-med walked in and said that the fighting had started at the Green. And I asked her, I says, do we have medical people we could send there? She says, yes. I says, well, send them all there. And then the phone rang again. At that time, it was the marshals. And I told them, I says, close all the gates at Yale University. Let people in, but don't let anybody out. Because I didn't want the riot to spread. So she transmitted that to the marshals. At first, they were resistant because it wasn't part of the plan. And then they went ahead and did it. And then at that point, she was ready to leave when the student leaders came back in. And the student leaders at first were really hostile at me and my brother still being there. And within a minute, they told us to go and represent Yale at a big meeting that they were having at this hall where there was hundreds of people. And we went there, and again, I was able to control who talked and who did what. But it was all based on what I had learned from one of the angels.
Wow. So what was your job? What was your employment at that time that you would be doing something at Yale like that?
Well, I knew students from Arizona that were at Yale. And when the pre-med students started organizing to prevent the radicals from taking over that weekend, they had heard about me from my days in Arizona. Because when I lived on a mountain, excuse me, quite a few people came to visit, especially on the weekend. And a lot of people had seen the various beings and spirits that showed up over there. So they told the students at Yale about me, and that's why they asked me to go there. But all day long, everything around me was completely controlled, and I knew that they were doing it. And at one point, when things were quiet, I asked, why am I doing these things? Why am I saying these things? And they explained to me really fast that sending the Red Cross to the square was because it was the only thing the two sides would respect. It was basically, they were not just manipulating the people around me, they were practically putting words in my mouth. Because these ideas were just coming and I was telling them one after the other. Right. But it wasn't even my plan. I didn't even go there with a plan. But it did work. Nobody died that day and we were able to prevent the radicals from taking over.
Wait, and what was this radical thing taking, what was going on there?
It happened Memorial Day 1970 at Yale University. There was this huge, it was Black Panther, there was a couple of hundred students that had come back from Cuba. There was, it was like a huge riot. They had brought in the National Guard and everything else. That weekend was supposed to be an all-out riot, out of control type of thing. But the pre-med students wanted to keep the radicals from taking over the stages and stuff.
Right.
So they said the theme of the day would be music, which kind of amused me. I'm tone deaf, so I don't know anything about music. But anyway, all day long, the conversation was kept on the subject of music so that no matter where you were, you could identify who was on your side and who was helping out because they would talk about music too.
Right.
But that was the theme of the day for preventing the radicals from taking over the university was music.
Wow. Hey, that sounds pretty. It's interesting to me because in the scriptures, whenever one of the patriarchs would want their son to get married, they would send out one of their servants, and they would say, the angel of the Lord will go before you, or your angel, or something like that. An angel would go before them and prepare things and make things happen, so that when the servant went to go pick up the new bride for the son, everything was done. And it sounds kind of like maybe that's what was going on with you, that they may have used you to prepare the way for whatever needed to work out to work out, and you were willing and able to do it.
Yes, that morning when I went there with my brother, there was like tens of thousands of people at the green, and I decided to go in the church to say a prayer. And I was amazed that me and my brother were the only people in the church. It was empty. And then the janitor, or whatever they call him, came over. My brother wanted to go to the bathroom. And I simply said a simple prayer. I says, if I'm supposed to be here and I'm supposed to do something, make it happen. But I had no plans at all. It's a strange situation where all these students and stuff thought that if I just showed up, I could make something happen, but I had no plan at all. I just showed up.
Well, I think that's the kind of people God likes, is the ones that don't think they have a plan, because He don't want to use anybody's plan. He wants to use His plan. And so, I mean, Moses didn't want to go when God sent him to Egypt to deliver the Israel out of captivity. He didn't want to go and didn't think he could and didn't think he was qualified. So I think that's why God picked him. And he didn't even want to speak, so God gave him Aaron to speak for him. And so someone that doesn't have any kind of plan at all, I think that might be the best kind for just going with the flow and letting God do the work. And sounds like to me that's kind of what happened with you.
Yeah, it's my concept of faith.
Right, there you go.
If it's supposed to happen, it will happen. But that's why halfway through the day I says, why am I saying these things? Why am I doing these things? I was running around telling people what to do, and I didn't even know what the effects were as to what we were trying to achieve,
Right.
But it was working.
Well, that's awesome. It sounds like you did a good job there. And was there any more of the details on? I tell you what, I've never heard of these big eyes. The what did you call them? Keepers of time?
No. There's two beings there. They're called the guardians of time. The two eyes are the eyes that see God.
Okay.
And I only saw them twice, and they both showed up at a time where one of my pets was dying. So
the beings and the big eyes were separate?
There was two eyes, really big, and I could only see some of it because the rest of it was in a cloud.
Okay.
And the eyes were not like round like ours or anything else. They were more like this kind of shape, and in the middle they were smaller.
Okay, so there's two eyes.
Two eyes.
Okay,
and it's completely surrounded. Excuse me. It's completely surrounded by this cloud that's made of the same matter as the eyes, but you can still see the eyes are separate.
And then there were separate beings with those?
No, all I could see was the eyes, and the only thing different from them, from any other being that I've ever seen, is that everybody else either moves like this, kind of gliding, and they actually move like hopping. They actually move like this.
Wow. That's incredible, man. I've never heard of such a thing. That's very interesting. I'll have to do some drawings to put up whenever I air this video. I want to get a representation of what it looked like, so it and it was all black looking matter and some.
Yeah, they have basically the same shape as you'd get from like two huge tires if you could only see part of them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were in a cloud, except that right in the middle of the eye, it goes in.
Right.
Like, it's not round, it's not slanted or anything else. It's like this, and then in the middle, it goes in like that.
Wow, that's interesting.
I like that.
That's really interesting. Hey, Gerard, do you have any thing you want to add?
Well, I was just thinking that there's a part of his story that I don't think he's covered yet, and that was when he first encountered these beings. The way he explained it to me was he was in the garden, and this being approached him, and that's basically where the story starts.
Well, the first couple weeks that I felt that there was someone reading my mind, it wasn't like it was happening all the time. It was usually when I went in the yard and worked in the gardens and stuff. We had flower gardens. And it became kind of I don't know how to elaborate too much on it, because it was like same thing all the time, in the sense that he was watching inside my mind, and I would be thinking of something silly, a book or TV or something like that, while I could see his mind doing his thinking, which is how I managed to learn their form of communications. But then when they understood that I knew their form of communication is when they sent somebody who was much more powerful and who said, "Who are you?" And that's when they determined that I was human. And at that point, a whole bunch of things happened afterwards where, like, you know, in rapid succession, like the time when he told me to go to sleep, and before the year was over, I was at Yale University, you know, which was like probably 5-6 months after this. So things were happening rather fast.